The Gemara tells us in Moed Katan, the one who sees the Ari Yehuda, the cities of Yehuda, Yerushalayim, and the Makam HaMikdash, the Beis HaMikdash B'Chorbano, in its destructive state, he has to write Kria, has to tear Kria. We're familiar with Kria when a person loses one of the 7 relatives, loses one of your loved ones, your mother or father, and you have to rip Kria, you have to rip your garment. Different discussion, which garments do you rip? The main one is has to be your shirt, but there's a discussion on your outer garment, whether it's just a beged covered or not. So that's a discussion in terms of how many begadim on where you have to rip, and there's a difference between ripping Kria for your parents versus someone else, on the left side versus the right side, how many begadim, how many clothes you have to rip. But we're familiar with the din of Kria by a funeral, so when you lose a loved one, and even though the halacha is me'ikar adin, you rip Kria if you're around b'shatz maisa, when the person dies, to rip Kria, that doesn't seem to be the minhag. The minhag seems to be you wait until the kfura, and one of the reasons brought down is because a person isn't all there, he's not thinking straight at the moment, therefore better to do it properly at the funeral, because you definitely yotzi at the funeral. The question is what's better, should you do it right away? The minhag doesn't seem to be that doctors or whoever are there b'shas meis rip Kria. And interesting, even though Tisha B'Av is a day of Avelos, there is no Kria, and perhaps that's because that's Avelos Yeshana, that's the old mourning. We only do Kria and Shas Chimam. You have to have the moment at the moment in time when you lose a loved one. But a national Avelos over an event that happened many years ago, that there's no halacha of Kria. So that's what the Gemara says. In addition to ripping Kria when you lose a loved one, you rip Kria when you see the cities of Yehuda B'Chorbano, Jerusalem, and the Makam HaMikdash. So, post-1967, when the Jews took over Jerusalem, Israel, we know in 1948 got the state, and in 1967 they took over the holy city of Yerushalayim. So they point out that what is the halacha regarding Kria? Now that we have Yerushalayim under Jewish control, and that was in 1967, now in 2012, not only is it under Jewish control, but it's built up, beautiful buildings, all the yeshivas. It seems to be binyano in a physical sense, but even post-1967, if you walk into or you see Yerushalayim, there's one have to rip Kria. The halacha still applies. That was a major discussion among the poskim on whether post-1967 do we still rip Kria over Yerushalayim. What is in the Kudas HaMachlokas? What is the issue? Are those poskim who say you no longer require Kria, and those who say you still require Kria? So the issue seems to be, the Beis Yosef brings down some of the issue, and this seems to be the opinion of Rav Moshe Feinstein, among others, that Bisman Hazel we no longer rip Kria on seeing Yerushalayim. Rav Soloveitchik and Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, among others, still felt that one should rip Kria. What's the issue? The issue is, what's Pshat Yerushalayim B'Vinyano? What's the Pshat, what's considered seeing Jerusalem in a state of Churban, of destruction? Is it a political entity that it's not under Jewish control, it's under foreign control? Is it that the majority of Jews are living in Yerushalayim? It's not clear exactly what is the definition of B'Chorbano. Or it's not clear which either way, or you're not clear what B'Binyana means. Because for many years we never had it. So now, post-1967, it's a discussion among the poskim. Rav Moshe writes, you no longer need Kria. Hence, Rav Moshe assumes that it's not It has to do with the political entity, with us controlling Yerushalayim. And since we have control back, we no longer rip Kria. Rav Soloveitchik felt very strongly that one must rip Kria, because Rav Soloveitchik holds that the Kedushas Yerushalayim stems from the Kedushas HaMikdash. It stems from the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash. And since everyone agrees the Beis HaMikdash is b'chorbano, there is no temple up. Therefore, if there's no temple up, so too there is no Yerushalayim up. It's the halachic reality, not the physical reality. And as Rav Soloveitchik brought different rayas that you could only eat certain type of karbanos, kachub kalim in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem gets its kedusha from its proximity to the Beis HaMikdash. Or Yerushalayim, as well as the Makam, as the Beis HaMikdash is called Lefnei Hashem Elokechem. So, based on this and many rayas, Rav Soloveitchik felt that Yerushalayim is still b'chorbano, and hence one still requires to rip Kria even bisman hazeh. And Rav Shlomo Zalman, I believe, writes to others that the fact that we see the big dome there in the Makam HaMikdash, that's also grounds that it shows that Yerushalayim, if you still have foreign worship in the city, it's still considered b'chorbano. So it depends on what your definition of b'binyano b'chorbano is. So the minig seems to be like Rav Moshe, seeing that one does not rip Kria upon seeing Yerushalayim. Some say that you should have in mind that when you go to the Makam HaMikdash, everyone agrees, when you go to the Kotel HaMaravi, by the Makam HaMikdash, everyone agrees it's considered b'chorbano when you rip Kria. So those supposed to say that when you rip Kria on the Kotel, on the Makam HaMikdash, have in mind that it should cover Yerushalayim as well. But everyone agrees the Kedushas HaMikdash that's a machlokes in general, the Rambam and Ravid, whether we have the Kedushas HaMikdash, even though the Rambam says we have Kedushas HaMikdash today, but we don't still have it in the full state. We don't bring karbanos for pragmatic reasons, and therefore it's still considered a karbano. The building's not there, even though makribim al b'shein lo bayis, but nevertheless, everyone agrees seeing the kotel is reason for ripping Kria. So in fact, by the minig is by Yerushalayim we rip Kria, by the Kotel Maravi we rip Kria, but Yerushalayim the minig is not to. I guess different poskim might maybe do different things, because perhaps the reason why we're lenient regarding Kria by Yerushalayim is because we have a general rule, halacha kedivrei hamekel ba'avelos. The halacha is that we're lenient by one who, by laws of mourning, we go with the lenient opinion. So perhaps that's what it's based on. But the question is, but the Gemara tells us in Moed Katan, Avelos l'chod v'kriya l'chod. The one halacha for Avelos, one category for Kria. So the fact that we say halacha l'divrei hamekel ba'avelos, the Gemara says doesn't apply to Kria. So how come then? What's the distinction? So in general, the machlokas rishonim, whether Kria is a mitzvah min Torah, a mitzvah midrabanan. Many assume it's only drabanan. I believe it's the Ravid shita that Kria is daraisa. So Bishlam, according to the Ravid, that Kria is daraisa. So by a suffix by Kria, you have to rip. But according to those rishonim who say it's only drabanan, why not suffix drabanan l'kula? So some point out we do say Savit Rabbanan L'Kula, but that's not the same as Halacha Kedivrei HaMekel Ba'avelos. Halacha Kedivrei HaMekel Ba'avelos is even, perhaps we even take a minority view that we wouldn't take in a normal case. We have a general rule of a dal by a rabbinical lenient, that applies to Kria. But there's a further rule that we even more lenient, whatever the details are, we're not going to go into now, that Halacha Kedivrei HaMekel Ba'avelos. So why don't we say, so over here by Kria, so why are we lenient? So perhaps it's because that's a different issue. The issue is when it's a question whether you're definitely chayev to do Kria, you're obligated to do Kria, and then the question is whether I fulfill my mitzvah. So then we'll be strict. But in the case over here, the whole mis'ava, the whole Kria itself is in doubt. So if the whole Kria itself is in doubt, so then we could go with the principle of halacha k'divrei hameiko ba'avelos. That's how Rav Shachta seems to say. And regarding a similar issue that we just observed Tisha B'Av last week, and in our Mincha Tefillah we say the Nachem. The Nachem, we say the prayer about God have Nachama on us, and it goes through the different texts of Jerusalem is Bechorбано, Bebizyonos, etc. It's desolate, and we want it to be rebuilt. So again, so Nachem is said at Mincha time, because at Mincha time already is the time where we start lining up after Chatzos on our Avelos at the Beis HaMikdash. The ironic sigh of relief that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and therefore, not that it's a good thing, but compared to, that's only Eitzim V'Avadim, it's only wood and stones. But for us, the fact that it was still alive, that was a Nachama, so we see Nachem. There were different gearses of Rachem, Nachem, but an aluminic is only to do it at Mincha. I think the Yerushalmi brings down, you say it all, 3 tefillas. The aluminic is to say Nachem in Al Mincha and Tisha B'Av, together with Aninu. So they point out that by the halacha of Nachem, this is again similar to our discussion by Kria. The poskim discuss post 1967. Is it appropriate to say Nachem the way it is in our siddur? And in fact, in the Hakdama to the new Koren OU keynotes on Tisha B'Av, I think they quote from Haskell Lookstein, writes that when he came to Eretz Yisrael in the summer of '67, he came there right before Tisha B'Av. They said kinos. Rabbi Gorin said kinos, and then the shul started. Rabbi Gorin read Eicha, and then the shul started saying kinos. And in the middle, everyone left. They felt the euphoria. How can we say kinos? We have back Yerushalayim. And then when Rabbi Lookstein mentions he felt a little bad about it, why they weren't saying the kinos. And then a year later, in the summer of '68, the Rav Selevan gave a shir on why Tisha B'Av is very relevant even Bizman Hazeh. And he basically went through how Tisha B'Av does apply, and we'll see Yerushalayim is still Bechorбано, but we'll come back to Rav Soloveitchik's opinion in a minute. So that was a discussion among the poskim. Rav Shlomo Goren was one of those who was very outspoken about it, that there's no need, so we take out the Nachem, because now that we have Yerushalayim, so it doesn't apply anymore. Yerushalayim is not Bechorбано, it's not Bebizuya, it's not desolate. How can we say it? Other poskim weren't as rash, as bold as taking the whole thing out, or I believe that's what he wanted to do. Others want to have maybe Rav David Halevi, who was our chief rabbi in Tel Aviv. He said maybe I'm not going to take it out, but maybe we should change it from present tense to past tense. Others point out, someone told me in the name of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, he doesn't publicize the psak, but he just doesn't say a couple of the words which he thinks are really totally not true anymore. And some say, what about, and Rav Soloveitchik felt very strongly, in general he's very traditional, and he felt very strongly that we can't change the Nusach HaTefillah. We have no right to change the text, and not even if we did, Yerushalayim is Bechorбано, as the Rav explained. Yerushalayim gets its Kedusha from the Makam HaMikdash. The Makam HaMikdash is destroyed, and therefore, what's the Shaila? Of course, we say Nachem, because it is Bechorбано, and because that's the halachic reality. If there's no Beis HaMikdash, then Yerushalayim is by definition Bechorбано. I don't care how many skyscrapers, how many nice buildings are there, it's by definition Bechorбано until the Mashiach comes, until we build the third Beis HaMikdash. And he said, how could we change normally it's a good taina. I mean, maybe here it's a good taina also. That seems to be the accepted view. We don't change it because, as Chazal tell us, whoever changes the matbeya, the chachamim, is not a good thing. But the other posts can point out, that's true when it's Anshe Knesset HaGedola. Some of the posts can say, but here, Nachem already went through 3 or 4 changes. The Nachem we say today isn't the original Nachem, so therefore it doesn't have the same teeth as if Anshe Knesset HaGedola did it, the rabbis, the Great Assembly, and therefore there is room to change a couple of words. So there are those who feel maybe to take it out, to change some words, or leave a couple of words out, but the consensus view, and in fact, interesting, Rav Cook as well, he follows Rav Soloveitchik on this, or Rav Soloveitchik follows Rav Cook, and he says also one should not change the Nachem because he obviously learns it's based on the Kedushas HaMikdash. So the Shiloh is Bishlomer of Soloveitchik. He's consistent in his view. He said he considers by definition Yushalayim is by definition B'charbano if there's no Beis HaMikdash. So hence he says even if you see Yushalayim today you should rip Kria because it's B'charbano. And Huadin you don't change Nachem. But Rav Moshe and perhaps Rav Cook as well, that they make a distinction that when it comes to Kria and Yushalayim they say no Kria. Apparently it's not B'charbano. But when it comes to Nachem, it is how. So how do you reconcile the two? So Pashas, one might say, either that there's a big difference when it comes to Kriya. So we don't have to worry. Okay, so there's no Kriya. But when it's changing the Nusach HaTfilah, that's a much bigger thing, and therefore I'm not willing to go that far. Or others want to say perhaps this difference is that it's true that. Maybe you hold it's not b'charbano like the halach of Kria, but since Tisha B'Av is a day of double trouble, Shani Tisha B'Av shehukpalot tzara, so today we focus on Korban HaPayis, so therefore perhaps it's inappropriate to change the text of Nachem on Tisha B'Av, even though maybe you don't actually think it's b'charbano. But those are the different shitas. The Minig Yisrael seems to be that we don't rip Kriya on seeing Yushalayim. If you want to have that in mind when you rip Kriya on the Kota Maravi, that seems to be a good sheet. There's no reason not to, unless you think for sure that Yushalayim doesn't need Kriya. And regarding Nachem, there's still discussion among some modern day poskim, but the consensus view seems to be that everyone I know, or most people, still keep the original text of Nachem, and we seem to go with Rav Soloveitchik's view that it's the Kedushas HaMikdash that gives Yerushalayim its Kedusha. And therefore, the many people as well, therefore, when we go to the Kota Maravi, once you rip Kriya, many people try to get around doing Kriya, or by switching, with that, there are many cases where people come. A couple of friends told me they go to the Kota and some Israelis come over or Americans say, "Oh, here, I'll give you my shirt," or "Let me switch shirts," or some legal fiction to avoid the mitzvah of Kriya. So even if the legal fiction works, maybe it does, but okay, but you don't get the mitzvah. By hook or by crook, you still haven't got the mitzvah of Kriya, so one should. If one goes to Yushalayim and the Kota Maravi, so you don't have to make a special trip because of it, but one should not look for some type of loophole to avoid ripping Kriya. If you go in a situation which warrants Kriya, Kadaya Korban HaBayis, that we rip Kriya. You don't have to take your Brooks Brothers $100 shirt or some other fancy shirt. You don't have to take the nicest shirt in the world. You could take a t-shirt or some other shirt, but at least Kedai al Korban HaBayis, that when one is at the kotel, one should try to fulfill the mitzvah of Kriya al Korban HaBayis.